say never again. And talking about James Bond, how are you today, Mr. Buckland?
I'm fine, thank you, Chair.
Good man, thank you very much. That's the first time you've been compared to James Bond for a while, isn't it? Brilliant, thank you very much. Right, Howard, before I do any more frivolity, I think we want to move on to the first item of the agenda, which is apologies.
Good morning, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Passingham, Councillor Alcock and Councillor Hencher-Serafin.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Howard said he couldn't hear me, and I thought that could be a bonus. So next item on the agenda is disclosures of interest. Any items of disclosure of interest on anything we're going to talk about tonight? No? Brilliant. Item number 3 is minutes of previous meetings. Is the committee happy to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of August that are a true affair record, and you'll give me your permission to sign them? Councillor Fradley.
It's just to update me.
Could you just get your microphone just a little bit closer to you? I suffered from that, so I'm glad I'm not the only one who does it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's great. Thank you very much.
Right. It's on the minutes, minute 180. Has that been resolved? What the statement is, because I'm not quite sure.
It's on the agenda today.
Sorry?
It's on the agenda today, Councillor Fradley.
Okay, thank you.
Substitute protocol item number 7. Yeah, substitute protocol item number 7. We'll talk about that later.
That's it.
Yeah. So apart from that, we are okay now. We can. Brilliant. Thanks very much. Chair's brief. No, nothing to update on. That isn't on the agenda today, so we'll move on to that one. Item number 5, work programme and forward plan, pages 7 to 22 of our agenda. Any comments, thoughts from members of the committee? Councillor Johnston, please.
If we just take the next meeting, is the transport plan and highways going ahead on the 1st, or could there be a delay?
It is envisaged they will be coming in on the 1st of November. The reason for the delay was that a senior officer who would come into the meeting left the county, so it wasn't wise to go ahead with it at the meeting. So, Councillor Keithley, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just in respect of the attendance by Warwickshire Highways, we were asked to put forward some questions, if you remember.
Yep.
And I put forward a couple. Are there any others I want to ask, and whether or not we could consolidate those so we could see what's been asked by members in advance? Because I wanted to give the Warwickshire officers some opportunity to investigate and come back with answers when they're actually attending the meeting.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We usually do that anyway, try and consolidate questions. Obviously, we are reliant on members of the committee to come forward with questions, and I'll bring some in as well. If we're really struggling as well, I try and augment. I try and let members of the committee lead with the questions, and if they need augmenting in terms of strengthening or in terms of numbers, I try and add on to those as well. Councillor Keithley?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, just in following that up, I suppose, what I'd like to do is to encourage all the members to think about this opportunity to ask questions of highways. There are general issues about, as you see, planning and such like, forward planning of highways works, and there are often very localised issues, like the appearance of road closures on Evesham Place this morning and last night, which caused absolute chaos with nobody actually working there.
Yeah, I think.
So what I'm saying
Yeah,
is,
I think a
could
good
we
question.
come forward with questions?
A good question for that would be, rather than an individual item area, but I think about principle for that question would be, why are road closures suddenly done at the last minute without any notification? There'd be some explanation of emergency works, different number of permits, etc. So, and sometimes the highways network has quite a few permits. I think it's tens of thousands of permits a year. And shall we say, not all the contractors act as well as they should do, and they're not as joined up as they should be. So I think if we can ask that question, why, rather than people giving individual details, but a general point, why are these suddenly emerging? What's caused these issues? And what are the fines, for example, if contractors don't state for their permit and things like that? So I think that could be another point as well.
That's a good question then, Chair. So perhaps could I suggest that you might ask that one yourself?
I think Howard's going to make a note for me.
Thank you.
So, any other questions on the work plan? I did, Councillor Curtis did want to be here today because we're talking about the digital strategy, and I think he was disappointed that he couldn't be here, and we're talking about it now. But unfortunately, part of the work plan, we don't, we can see what's on the forward plan for the Cabinet, but sometimes we have to talk about what we see on the Cabinet papers, and we don't always necessarily get those papers in advance. So, and that is an unfortunate thing. So, apologies, Councillor Curtis, we will be talking about it. We've got able assistant substitute there, Mr. Burrell, who will be able to answer all the questions anyway. So, he didn't say no anyway, which is a good sign. It's always a good sign from an accountant when he doesn't say no. So, that's a good word. So, I think we'll try and get portfolio holders there to give some detail, but unfortunately there'll be times when we can't bring them forward. So, any other points, Councillor Waller-Huggins, please?
Yeah, just to get back to the updates on the Victorian Christmas market, I thought we were going to have another update on that before the actual event itself.
Yeah, I think that yeah, we'll speak about that one on the outside. There are a couple of things that are ongoing at the moment, so rather than preempt things, I'll make sure we get back to you, and I'll put a report. I'll put an email around to all members of the committee on the progress on that one. So please remind me if I haven't within the next week or so. But yeah, again, it's on the minutes. It'll be on the webcast that I've made that commitment. Brilliant. So thank you for that. We're all happy with that, and then again we'll review that on an ongoing basis. Next item on the agenda is public participation. Questions? So there's no questions from that, so we'll move on to the substitute protocol. Mr. Perks, would you like to come in on that one first? Obviously, we've talked about the substitute protocol, whether over in the Scrutiny Committee would like to request a view to inform a potential substitute protocol for this committee, and what the Constitution, what the effects would be on the Constitution to make that necessary. So we did talk about that briefly. I know that Councillor Rolfe has brought that forward, and we've got a few people not able to attend today. I think we've gone to the real expert on this rather than the Mr. Perks. He does a really good job, but he's not the expert in this. Is that right, Mr. Perks? I'll take that.
Thank you, Chair. And Tony Perks is an expert too, I'm sure. Just on the issue of the agenda item, So, as I understand it, there was a request by your good selves for consideration of substitutes at Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and possibly other committees as well. I'm not too sure of the why as to why that would actually be the scenario, but clearly, if that's what you want us to consider, we will consider it. The first thing to say is that in accordance with the Constitution, that there's an order to these things, and the Constitution does require that it's considered firstly by audit and standards, following a report from the monitoring officer, then on to full council. And at that particular point, I think it makes sense to approach in that particular way, because we will need time to obviously look at the legal implications, any constitutional considerations or knock-on effects for the other parts of the Constitution, should we change things, if that's what's agreed, finally, in the circumstances. And also, we want to make sure we do it right, because we have a separations of powers model within our Constitution, and we want to stay the right side of that in whatever we decide, and whatever the members decide once it goes through audit and standards, and then on to full council.
We happy with that? Sorry about that. Yeah, and again, I think that if we do want to give the head of law and government a steer of what we want to do, I think one of the things that I would like us to consider is the role and requirements of members when they join this committee, whether they're actually full members of the committee or substitutes, and their responsibility to ensure they're up to date, read the reports, had the right training, the scrutiny training, which we had the other week, which was really good, by the way. Thank you, Mason. That was excellent. I can't remember the speaker's name, but she was really good. So again, if you could pass that over from Scrutiny Committee Chair, that it was well worth attending. But attendance was reasonable on that. I think we had a few members of this committee there. Quite a few portfolio holders, so well done the portfolio holders, well done. Thank you, Natalie. So so there's quite a few portfolio holders, and I think there's the odd extra councillor, odd as in one or two, not as in strange, non-member of the committee there. So as well. So well, there was the interest in to attend that always because it was there a certain time and they couldn't attend, but. If it does get repeated again, or we have an additional version on that, I recommend this committee attend it and pass the word either through cabinet or through party lines that attendance would be a benefit to people, to councillors particularly. So I think that's covered that bit. I'll bring in Councillor Rolfe first because this is her baby, shall we say, and then bring in Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. May I ask Marcia a question? Do we need to make a formal proposal that it goes, a paper goes to audit and standards, or is, or what? I mean, how do we vote on this that we ask for it to go to? Thank you.
I understand from the chair that the intention is to take a vote here as to whether or not you want to take that forward.
Councillor Johnson, please.
At the last meeting, we also raised the issue of the membership of task and finish groups, and that seems to not be part of this resolution. Is that going to be dealt with differently, or should we be seeking to amend this proposal if we wish to see membership of task and finish groups included?
Come on with that one.
So with task and finish groups, with the membership being set up each time by the group, there's no standard terms of reference for all task and finish groups in the Constitution. So they're set each time by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So the membership, the question that you had last time about being opened out to wider members or being opened initially just to OSC. So like with the last task and finish group we had, the committee agreed to basically say that initially the membership would be open to the OSC, and then later, if there were any vacancies remaining, then it'd be opened up. But that's subject to change each time.
So I think we were saying that from an Overview and Scrutiny Committee point of view, the General Committee rather than the Task and Finish Group, we were open to discussing substitutes. I think from the Task and Finish Group, we would be more flexible And I still think the whole point of having task and finish groups as part of over and scrutiny is that it should initially be made up of members of over and scrutiny committee, because it's their task and finish group. It doesn't preclude us from bringing extra members in when necessary, and it doesn't preclude us from bringing in councillors with expertise on a ad hoc basis. But my strong opinion is that the first bit about over and scrutiny committee substitutes not too much of an issue, apart from the fact they need to know their responsibilities and they need to be well trained. But the second one, task and finish groups, I think the substitutes are not needed formally. I think we bring them in on a ad hoc basis as agreed by the chair of that task and finish group. So that's just my 2 points on that one. Councillor Wally-Huggins, please, then Councillor Fradley.
Sorry, it's a question. So would the substitutes, I know we're going to vote on it, but would the substitutes be worked in a similar way to, like, say, planning committee, where you're only allowed a certain number of substitutes? It's not an infinite number of substitutes that you can just put in. That was my question, because and then the next question is, so how many substitutes would each political group sitting in this room be allowed to nominate? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. I think that's all part of what would be in the review in the paper that would go to audit and standards for consideration at this particular point, if the truth be known.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Councillor Wally-Huggins. We've got to give officers a clear steer. Well, steer sounds a bit harsh there, but some ideas that we would like to be looked into. And I think that was a good point, and I'm sure you covered it anyway, but I think if we better say it twice and not at all, if that's okay. I've got Councillor Fradley next, please. Councillor Mrs Fradley, rather than Councillor.
I just wanted to make a comment, actually, because not everyone can sit on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I think it's one of the most interesting committees because you get such an overview of the workings of the council. And there will be councillors out there who've got a particular interest in a task and finish group that's put up, and they might actually be very, very keen to sit on that particular task and finish group, which is of particular interest to them. I think that should be part of the consideration, because quite often people feel, just would have liked to actually put my 10 pence in there.
And I'll come back in.
Yeah, I think what we're sort of getting to here is that there are councillors with specialist interests and specialist expertise that would be valuable to the committee. And it's within the committee's gift when establishing task and finish groups to sort of invite members with expertise who they think will add to the work of the task and finish group. But I do take the chairman's point that the task and finish group is a subset of Overview and Scrutiny Committee, so it must be sort of led from a scrutiny perspective, taking advice from these experts, which you can invite, you're at liberty to invite in. The only other point is to sort of just make sure that you avoid the separation of powers issues such that you don't invite sort of cabinet members who will be sort of making decisions. We've got to stay the right side of the governance there, which the monitoring officer will advise in the paper going forward.
That sounds very helpful, that the councillors actually are made aware when a committee is being set up, that they could actually come forward and say, I do have particular interests here, which might be of use, so that they actually feel that they are involved with it.
Just playing devil's advocate on that, you know, if I would expect some councillors to take some responsibility to see what's on, you know, if they've got this interest in Overview and Scrutiny Committee and they're not actually a member and they're considering thinking about joining it or want to join, there is some onus on them to look at what's on the agenda themselves and what we talk about. And like I say, yeah, it would be quite administratively onerous for the committee services officers to tell everybody about it. So I think we've got to take a little bit of responsibility ourselves. And also that's what we talk about in the group meetings as well, where the groups can discuss it, you know, who would like to attend or etc. So I think I sort of see your point, Councillor Fradley, but I don't necessarily agree with it. Come back in, yeah.
Just an email that tells everybody there is a task and finish group to be set up on this particular subject.
Mr Buckland, please.
Yes, sorry. I'm here for later items. want to try and understand the problem we're trying to solve here, because at the moment we've got total flexibility about how we make up the OSC. And look, I've sat on OSC task and finish groups which have been wholly made up of members from this committee, groups which have got a representation from this committee and then representation from full council. I wouldn't have thought you want to get to a point where you've got a hard and fast rule on it, that the committee, every time you consider whether you want a task and finish group, makes that decision about whether it's going to be from within this group or whether you're going to look to the wider membership of council for that support. I don't know what's broken, to be fair. I don't know what's led to the point that we're having the conversation about the task and finish groups today and the membership of those. So, and that's my ignorance.
No, I think we have been flexible, particularly around the registered social landlord. We were inviting members in who had quite a bit of experience come in. I know Councillor Alcott was one of those before she actually came on the committee. And she played a valuable role in the part, and I know her and Councillor Rolfe dovetailed on that really well. Compliment there to you, Kate, so by the way, we'll make a note of that one. So I think that's, I think we have been quite flexible. I don't think that, and when you look at the quality of that report and the ongoing work we're doing from that, I don't think there's been any detriment, and I think we work really well. So are we potentially using the sledgehammer to crack a nut? I don't know. I'll bring Councillor Littlewood in, then Councillor Wally Hoggin.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I just wanted to, having worked on task and finish groups, it's clearly different from overview and scrutiny. It's in the title. You've got a task and you need to finish it. That means you have to focus. It means that you have to be consistent and be there to do the work. And I can't see how a substitute of an individual on a task and finish group could work. So I think that is a bit of a dead end for discussion, frankly. However, it's up to the rest of people. That's my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as having served as a chair on a task and finish group, I think it's within your gift then it should be within your gift to actually ask members, like we did with Victoria, Councillor Alcock, to come in and talk to us with her invaluable assessment there. And I think that what I don't want is any restrictions on who could be invited in to join that group, because it could well be that it's a person from outside this committee that has brought this matter to our attention for us to actually look at, which is exactly what was the case with the housing associations, because we were all experiencing that. And what we also have to remember as members of this committee, it's a very serious committee, but we are also speaking on behalf of our colleagues within our group. So it is very much down to the communication strategy within each group. And also that leads me on to the fact that the appointment of members of this group, of this committee, is down to the group leaders, and that is why it's so invaluable that we have the work programme here. So this can all be spoken about. I mean, I think fundamentally what needs to actually probably be better is that all members of this council should be reading the overview and scrutiny papers, and they should all be reporting back to those that represent them on this committee with their questions to be posed. It doesn't necessarily have to come from without, and to make sure that we are the voices for our colleagues within our group, and really we're also the voices for our residents, and that's why it's so very, very serious. So I'm concerned that we are. I understand the need for, if you like, substitutes. I'm actually probably an advocate for that, because, like planning committee, this is a big committee of people here, all right. But I do think that messing about with something for the sake of it is not there, and it is testament to the chairs of the task and finish groups, really, as to that. And we all have to be vigilant about these papers. Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I think, is the one lot of papers that probably at our parish council meetings, they want to hear, how have you held people to account? How have we got the best value for our money? And so therefore, colleagues, I suggest that we need to work a bit smarter and possibly, dare I even say it, a bit harder. Everybody should be contributing to this group, and to our colleagues from out saying, actually, here's an example from my ward, can you possibly ask this question for me? So that's just just a thought, really, and I just wanted to emphasise that, because nobody that's chairing a task and finish group is going to deny anybody a freedom of speech on that committee if they've got something really good to contribute. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson, do you want to come back in, please?
It's interesting coming back on this council. When I was last on the council, and the first time I worked with Mr. Buckland was on a task and finish group on, if I remember rightly, some allocation of grant. I was the only Lib Dem on the group because of the structure of the council at the time, and we reported direct to the cabinet. Something has happened in the constitution since, and it's interesting to see the way the thing has changed. I think we're kind of having the discussion we should be having after we see the review, and I would like to propose that we do request a review and we take a decision on it.
Have we got a seconder for that? Councillor Rob? Marcy, do you want to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just want to clarify that the paper that I believe you are now voting on is as regards substitutes for OSC and possibly ASC, whether or not that should be a consideration. And that paper will go from audit and standards to full council. I am not looking at the issue of task and finish.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Again, I've got no real issues with it. I've got no issues with the Overall Scrutiny Committee asking about substitutes. My issue is on the Saxon and Finish groups. I don't think we should do, and I don't think we're going to do now, depending on the proposer agreeing to that. What I would also add is that we could ask the Head of Law and Governance, hopefully got your title there, to look about explaining the roles and responsibilities of being on these committees as a substitute, and also potentially explaining the difference that planning committee are usually discrete one-off items. You've got your same principles regarding the NWPF, and you look at those principles, but you don't seem to have long-running planning applications that come back several times. You sometimes get those occasionally that when developers come back in. But a lot of the work we're doing, particularly over in Scrutiny, has been running for a long while. And one example is this: we had the ICB in. And when they come back in again, which they undoubtedly will in the next 12 months, it'd be interesting to see the experiences of the members on that committee when they first came, to see compared when they come back and see where they've asked the questions, whether they are saying the same things. So I think there is a bit of continuity we've got to take into account as well. So I think there will be a bit of a difference between a straight substitute on planning committee, which could be a discrete one-off, as opposed to a scrutiny, over in scrutiny substitute, which you need to take all the context and the work plan and things that are going on. So hopefully I've explained what I want from the head of law, would like the head of law and governance to potentially consider as well, if possible. Whether that's beyond the remit, I'm obviously, I can be told I'm talking rubbish there, as usual, but I'm more than happy. I'll see, come back in place on that one.
Thanks, Chair. Just to clarify, when we review and look at whether or not there ought to be a change to the Constitution, we do consider the pros and cons of, or the benefits or disbenefits of, generally speaking, and any exceptions or possible conflicts, etc. So that would be in the base of a report in any event.
I knew you were going to say that really nice, but I just thought we'd get out in there. Councillor Johnson, are you happy that your proposal is that we just look at substitutes as the actual overview and scrutiny committee, and not include, which I think the Head of Law Governance has said, really it's not in the remit to look at substitute on task and finish groups?
I'm proposing that we adopt the resolution here as drafted. I accept that it doesn't include task and finish groups.
Oh, good. I thought we'd have some clarity around it. You know, no, you've said that. That's fine. So your proposal is that we can that Overview and Scrutiny Committee would like to request a review to inform a potential substitute protocol for the committee and relevant changes to the Constitution. Brilliant. Can't be more clear on that, can we? So when it comes back next time and somebody says, why didn't you look into that? We've got this down. Brilliant.
Okay.
Yep. Oh, yes, we've had a vote on that. We've had a proposal in the seconder. All those in favour? All those against? It's carried unanimously. Thanks for that. We got there in the end. I think we had to get some clarity around this. All right, item number 8. Budget Standing Panel. This is to establish a budget standing panel to review and scrutinise capital revenue and treasury management information throughout the year and provide evidence to the budget task and finish group. I think the terms of reference have been drafted. Is that right, Howard?
Yeah, since the agenda's been out.
Yeah, so they've been working on that. And I believe that the Centre for Governance Scrutiny and the Statutory Guidance on Scrutiny advise that scrutiny of council finances should be a year-round exercise, which, again, I think is quite reasonable. So what this panel would do would be seeking to carry out the additional work. Yeah, brilliant. And again, with this panel, it would avoid a further burden in the OSC work programme. And again, this is almost like a pilot. If this works well, we could then look at establishing further standing panels to separate and perhaps give more focus on areas such as performance and policy. But again, I think we walk before we run. I think this is a fair and reasonable thing to do. And yeah, again, I think we want to talk about it. And then I'll bring Martha in, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a question from me at the moment. When you're referring to a budget standing panel, may I ask, will that be a full-time panel standing all year round or just part year round? I ask because within the Constitution, if it were to be a panel formed in a particular way, it would need to go to full council.
See where you comes through, you were creating almost like another committee, aren't we? I think from my point of view that maybe a part year one, so therefore we don't have to go through 2 formal processes, and well, we'll go through the formal processes, but go through a long-winded, convoluted way that wasn't thought about when we've come up with this idea. But I'm more than happy to be guided by officers on the best way forward of this. I think it's the right thing to do because obviously we all know budgets are an integral part of the way the council works, and we all know that many councils are under severe financial pressures. So obviously if we haven't got the money to do these things, we can't put the policies out, and we would have to limit what we can and can't do. I'm sure Mr. Burrell's hand on the tiller is guiding through us some choppy waters, and we're sailing towards calmer waters at the moment, he says, fingers crossed. But Mr. Briggs, do you want to come on that one?
Yeah, I wondered if it would help the committee if I just sort of gave a bit of an overview of where we are at the moment with budget monitoring to see if we should sort of build on that rather than sort of reinvent it or work out how we go. Did you say there's some terms of reference in circulation, Howard? I don't think I've seen those. Are they available to the committee?
Not in circulation yet. They've been worked on basically. Yeah, we're still looking at them at the moment.
Thank you. So they're in draft form. So that's my first question. Currently, we provide budget monitoring on a 2-monthly basis to the cabinet, and as the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, you have the right to sort of look at that as part of your meetings, or you could look at it outside of the meetings. In reality, because it's quite contemporaneous, we're unusual to provide information that frequently. Most people do it quarterly, but we do it sort of 2-monthly. That does mean the information is fairly contemporaneous. It's not available a long time before the meetings. Now, the task and finish, the panel, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee can do what they like with that information and can feed any of that sort of back to Cabinet. So would we be trying to fit something into that regime? My concern is if we go outside of that regime, you're going to end up scrutinising information that's quite a long time in the past, because the Cabinet would have already seen that information. If you don't sort of fit into the window before it being generated, which Mr. Burrow and his team can't generate it until it's happened, and trying to take it to the Cabinet quickly says our monitoring is contemporaneous. If we fall outside that window, I'm not quite sure how the scrutiny would be effective. And if we're doing it within that window, we can make that information available to you either at this meeting, or you could have a group that sort of met outside, but it would need to report into this meeting if it's to get to the Cabinet in time for it to be sort of relevant. So perhaps that gives some context. It might be useful.
I think perhaps we might just need to perhaps do slightly a little bit more work on this then before we make a decision. I like the principle of the fact that we look at it more often on a regular basis, because the budget task and finish group really kicks in from November onwards, December onwards, doesn't it?
That has a different role.
That's a different role. But so I think we need to differentiate between the two roles. I do think, we don't necessarily. I take your point that the reports do come to Cabinet every couple of months, but usually we don't spend too much time talking about them here, which I think we should do. I do sometimes ask some awkward questions to Councillor Curtis and Mr. Burrell, but I think we could potentially need to spend some more time on it. And I think because there usually are packed agendas on Scrutiny Committee, we don't spend that time. So I think this might be a way of augmenting what we do and getting the information back to full Cabinet. So I can see the need for it. I think the principle's right. I think that we've perhaps been slightly remiss in our role of not really tackling and not really challenging as strongly as we should do, or interrogating the capital and revenue monitoring that come through every couple of months to Cabinet. So I think there's need for it, but I think we just need to make sure we're a bit clearer of how it's going to work and how it's going to dovetail in with OSC meetings prior to Cabinet meetings as well. So I know I'm slightly kicking it down the road a bit, but I think we need to, if we're going to make a decision on how we're going to do it, I think we need to look at it slightly more, and then we'll have the potential terms of reference. If we've got the terms of reference in front of us, I think we can then make the decision. So I think we're floating the idea in principle that it's something we need to spend more time on, and then potentially at the next meeting, we look at this in more detail and then spend more time and see what our concerns are. Are we happy with that? I'm not seeing any dissension. Officers, are you happy that we've got a way forward that's...
So would you like us to come up with some ideas about how we could fit some scrutiny into the window between the financial information being published by the finance team and the OSC meetings on the Friday before the Cabinet on the Monday, such that the OSC could be informed, perhaps have a fuller picture that you could then represent to Cabinet on Monday? Is that what we're sort of aiming to achieve, if we can make that work?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I've drawn that out, so we'll look at that.
Yep. Councillor Walhogans, please.
Yeah, it's just a thought, sorry to add to the burden of this, but just a thought that I think there's an expectation from central government that things change quite rapidly there, and some of the proposals that I hear are coming down the line with regard to local government finance. I think there has to be, I think as a council, it is in our best interests for us to be as rigorous with those updates as possible, and any implications for us as a council and by de facto our residents of any of the proposals that are made regarding, the financing local government. And I think that what's being proposed here, I think if we could add that into that, apart from just the number crunching, I think that makes us very much more effective and far more accountable to the residents of Stratford. I think we've always got to have within this committee, so what does that mean for our residents? And I think that if we could just add that into that particular committee, I think that will make the difference Does that make sense? Thank you.
Yes, it does. I'm presuming we will still have the budget task and finish group that will look at the macro budget when we're sort of setting it before council at the start of the year. And this is more sort of a monitoring and exceptions type role that we see if that budget has sort of stood the test of time, but we've got an eye to sort of any central government changes or any sort of changes to our sort of budget framework going forward in year. Is that what you sort of trying to pick up?
It is. It's also things like when we look at the when the winter fuel payment, for example, when that was abolished in the summer. I think that there was just a flurry of activity of emails. I'd like this number. How many residents do you think this affects? That kind of thing. And I think that it would be. I think it would be useful for all of us for when any things like that happen. How does this affect our residents? Rather than it so that we're working at it again. Smarter, really. Just, you know, what are those implications? How many of our residents will be affected? And then I think that actually gives us a grounding for, that's part of our scrutiny, really. How it's, you know.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I think that just following on that point is whether things that happen in year have an implication, not only financially, but in terms of workload as well, because, you know potentially we've all heard that the news around the winter fuel allowance, but will more people start applying for housing benefit? Will there be additional resources needed or increased workload in our benefits area and liaison with our partners, etc.? So it's just the things like that I think lots of our residents would like to know. Councillor Keithley, I thought you were going to say you were just about happy and we can move on, but you can come on in, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just interested to reflect on what Tony Perks said, that we already have some sort of monitoring report on a 2-monthly cycle. Is that right? Is that what you said, Tony? And many others have it on a quarterly cycle.
Yes, you receive an update on the revenue and the capital budgets monitoring sort of on a 2-monthly basis. As a common, it's not sort of unique, but generally that's done quarterly, so you have quite a frequent.
So we have a frequent cycle of monitoring. You expressed concern, Chair, that perhaps we didn't spend enough time at this meeting reviewing that monitoring. Well, the process seems to me to already be in place. And it's perhaps a failure on our part not to spend enough time looking at those monitoring reports. So that actually begs the question as to whether or not the format of that report makes it easy enough for us to see what's going on, where to see where some of the risks are, some of the issues are. So I'm just going to ask the question as to whether or not, looking over at Richard, whether or not we need to think about the way in which that report is brought to this committee to make it easier for this committee to undertake that overview of that monitoring data. Sometimes it's quite detailed, and people in this meeting perhaps haven't got the experience to assess and to really make good sense of it. So perhaps there's something we could do there rather than creating another layer of scrutiny. The process seems to me to already be in place. It's just that we need to spend a bit more time looking at it in here. Richard, do you want to comment? Perhaps you could comment on that.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, as you say, there is regular budget monitoring reports. It's tricky to structure a report that imparts enough information for the reader to understand what's going on without it being too lengthy. We've got about 55 services. It could be a huge document going into huge amounts of detail, but there's no reason why this committee couldn't identify an area within that report that they would like further information on, and I would suggest perhaps that may be a way forward to expand on a particular area, because many of those 55 services are operating within budget and don't raise any alarm bells. You know, there may be areas that, for example, as Councillor Worley-Hagen said earlier on, if the winter fuel payments mean housing benefit has greater pressure, and certainly within that report there's an out-term position quoted, and if suddenly that out-term position becomes more more problematic, unfavourable, then perhaps the committee may want to sort of call not only myself but the head of housing and revenues in to say, you know, to ask the question of why is that anticipated to cost this council more in the longer term, so to get some more background to what's going on behind those figures.
And I suppose, obviously, we've mainly concentrated on revenue here, but I think, obviously, we spend significant amounts on capital works. And, obviously, if there's a delay or slippage in the capital works, it still builds up our balances, which has a knock-on effect. We're getting significant amounts of investment interest, which is bolstering the revenue budgets. If we spend those capital amounts on capital that we intend to spend, then there's the implication of less money to invest, and then with the interest rates falling and less money to invest, there's less investment interest to bolster or support any potential underperformance in, you know, I think car parking was one of the areas that was down compared. I'm good. I'm getting some good nods there, which is good. So I think there are implications, and again, I do think we need to spend more time on capital than we do. We do tend to quite rightly concentrate on revenue, but I think we do need to look at the implications on the revenue budget of some of these capital ones as well. So, so I think I think this is a work in progress. I think we do need to do these things, but yeah, let's see. Mr. Perks, you've got a cunning plan, haven't you? You wanted to come in, didn't you?
I think so. Having listened to what everybody said, I think what would be really useful to us in the first instance, before we go off and reinvent something, is if we could do sort of a training session, a budget scrutiny training session, where perhaps Mr. Burrell could come along and present the reports that we've already got to give members the ability to quickly appraise and understand them. And then from that, we may find that they're deficient, or we may find that all the information that people want is there. It's just sort of pointing out where to look for it. And when we've done that and got an understanding of it, if there is a different way we need to work, perhaps we could do that from an informed position, whereas at the moment, I think we might end up sort of duplicating if we're not careful. So if you would be happy with that as a proposal, I'll ask Mr. Burrell and the member development working team to sort of get together and put on a training session that we can sort of get right under the bonnet of what the figures we are producing, so as people can understand them and see if that's helping us.
And if we need an oil change, when we're under the bonnet. No, I'll bring you in a minute, councillors. Yeah, I think that's fine. I don't believe we should reinvent the wheel. I don't think we should have duplication. And I don't think we should create any extra layers of work and bureaucracy for the finance team. Yeah, with me finance hat on there, yeah, stand up for the finance team occasionally. I think yeah, I think we need to know what we want. I think it's important we do take the scrutiny properly and look at the implications in this training programme. Where we can talk about the impact on the revenue budget of capital items such as slippages, etc., and balances and investment interest as well. So I think that's quite important. Councillor Littlewood, do you want to come in, please?
Thanks, Chair, but you've just covered in your summing up.
Hey, great minds and that thinking alike. So I'll make a note of that. I've got something right again there. So not very often, but we'll make a note of that seriously about the fact that the implications of revenue on capital and vice versa. So I think we've got a plan. We look at the training session that Mr. Burrell and his team will put forward to us about the budget, the scrutiny, capital and revenue, and obviously I'll touch about it indirectly with Treasury Management in terms of investment interest and our balances. And then we can look at the budget standing panel at another meeting in the future. Mr. Perks, you happy you've got some notes on?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I would suggest that we make the training available to all members, because then if we do have substitutes or anybody else, then it just spreads that knowledge, so I presume that.
That's a very good point, Mr. Perks. Yep, Howard, do you want to come in? Yep.
Yep, just on the subject of training on scrutiny and finance, there is a session being run by the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, available to all members on the 23rd of October. I've sent everyone an email, so if you have a look at that should help as well, provide a bit more wider context.
Brilliant. So, thank you very much. If you could make a note of that, 23rd of October. Right then, minutes of the climate change panel, which is on page 23 to 28. So have you got any comments on that? comments on that? Again, we have the usual speakers. And we spoke about the climate change delivery plan. And then there was one of the things we spoke about was this Climate Energy UK, the Freedom of Information responses, where they were using the information to like benchmark us compared to other local authorities in terms of how we were looking at the climate emergency, the climate change, etc., and how environmentally friendly we were and how potentially carbon neutral, etc. we were. I think at the climate change panel, a few meetings ago, we discussed the fact that we were comparing potentially apples with pears, and some of the information needed a lot more detail. So we felt that the climate change panel would sense check, for want of a better phrase, or look at the responses that they did back to on the FOI responses, because in some areas, last time from memory, we were being perceived as not being particularly brilliant, whereas it was the opposite, and there'd been some interpretation of our responses or that. So I think, whilst I accept as chair of scrutiny that we should be scrutinising what we do, I think any criticism should be fair and reasonable. And if we are doing these things, we need to make sure we tell this Climate Change UK team what we're doing and the reasons for them. So and we are comparing apples with apples and that. So I think that's fair and reasonable. Any comments on that? I'm going to say, Councillor Keithley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Well, this is the first climate change panel that I attended, and I would just like to thank you for seconding me proposing myself to be the Vice Chair. But I would like to say, whilst we're on this topic, if you turn to minute 202, that was the delivery plan. I've got to admit, I've been a little bit critical in the past about the speed with which we're delivering some of these initiatives. And what I've seen in the last year, particularly, is that Eleanor has done some really outstanding work in focusing our attention on delivering on these actions and prioritising them. And I think that we should recognise the progress that's been made, and I think we should be very grateful to her and for the efforts that she's put in. So that's what I'd like to say.
Yep, I think that's a fair summary, Councillor Keithley. I think, yeah, there was the need to focus the minds. We did seem to be distracted, I think might be one raised, that we were going from one thing to another, and we seemed to be needed to concentrate and joined up as well, joined up all the dots or the different partners, and also our internal partners within the council. So we got a consistent approach. I think that we have started through that climate change panel to have matters arising and the actions completed, and I think that's helped. So I think we've started to being quite robust on this, but yeah, I endorse your comments, and I think if you're happy that we minute those as part of the agreement of the minutes.
Yeah, that would be nice. Thank you.
Any other points? Councillor Waller-Huggins, please.
Yeah, just to go back to question 3 from Claudine Pearson, I'm just asking for some clarity, really. The Climate Change Community Fund, and they said something about the Climate Change Project Manager would arrange a meeting to discuss what support would be beneficial to sports clubs. What meeting, and who would be invited to that meeting?
Yeah, I don't think they've been quite agreed yet, because I remember speaking about that. We were talking about particularly around about artificial pitches and flooding and support that the council can particularly do through its, I can't remember what's its policy. Have we got an active sports policy? Or
yeah, we have an active community strategy, and I wasn't at the meeting, so I'm only commenting sort of based on the minutes, but we will have a second round of the Community Climate Change Fund opening for bids by the end of the year. It looks like we were trying to sort of see whether there could be any opportunities under that for sports clubs to apply. Now, I haven't got an update as to where Ellen has got with that, but I can sort of update offline if that would be useful.
Yeah, that would be very easy because I think they were trying to make the pitches more resilient and sustainable. From a sporting point of view, we all know that if you have a lot of rain, it floods a pitch, so you can't do anything about it. Or if it's dry in the winter, it's -10, and then the pitches are frozen, and you still can't play on them. So again, we were talking about the need for all-weather pitches or waste to cover, or to make them protective as possible. And I think it was discussed at the time some options where the potential funding could be, and to link to the council as well. So, are we happy with that? And Mr. Perks will come back to the meeting, to members afterwards. So I take that we're all happy that that we note the meeting climate change panel on the 3rd of September. Next item on the agenda is the cabinet meeting of the 7th of October. So we were going to discuss. Obviously, we've got the cabinet here. We were going to be discussing the following items, which is the communication strategy, and we've got Mr. Buckland here and the team. We've got the digital strategy with Richard and the team, and we've got the corporate peer challenge, and we've got David and Tony. So we've got a select band here today. So if we want to start, I would, obviously we'll do it in order, the communication strategy. Mr. Buckland, if you just want to give us just a little brief overview. Obviously, I raised a couple of points prior to the meeting, and then I'll bring members in to discuss the communication strategy, please.
Thank you, Chair. And look, it's really exciting that we've got the opportunity to present the communication strategy here before it's considered at Cabinet on Monday last week. I do want to pay tribute to Bev and the team for putting together what I think is an excellent document, much better than the first draft that I came up with. But anyway, we won't dwell on that. Before I get into the report itself, I'm aware that there's a couple of typos in the covering report. I don't want that to really detract from what we're trying to achieve through this strategy, because we have known for some time as an organisation we needed a comm strategy to bring some kind of order to the activity that we undertake as a local authority. We have a really active, busy and professional team in relation to comms, but what we haven't had today is an overriding strategy that pulls all of that together and what we're trying to seek to achieve. We had already put within the council plan that was approved in February the requirement to bring forward a communication strategy by October, and this is what the comm strategy that you have got in front of you today will achieve. To help actually supplement and inform what the comm strategy should look like, we've had two additional pieces of work. So we're talking about the corporate peer challenge in a short while. One of the recommendations that the peer review team actually came up with was the development of a comm strategy. Well, yeah, we already knew that, so we were doing that, but they did make us aware of a service through the local government association called the Health Check, the Communications Health Check, which we did undertake as a local authority, and that gave us some good ideas for incorporation within this document. We've also, and Simon just sent you all, I know, a week or so ago, the results of the resident survey. We knew the resident survey was coming up, and it was a good opportunity to touch base with our residents about how well informed they feel about the council and what kind of information they would like to receive about the council, and to be fair, how. For me, and Chair, if I just refer to the chart on page 160 of the Cabinet Agenda, or page 8 of the comm strategy itself, there's a chart there that we've, as you'll be aware, Simon's been undertaking the resident surveys for several years. We've got some really good trend analysis on how questions have answered. How well our residents feel informed about the council has traditionally been high 50s, 60%. I don't know what we did in 2017, but that was an exceptional year. In 2022, we stopped producing the View magazine that went to every household, or was near to every household within the district as we could possibly achieve. for me, there's a direct correlation between that and the 44% result now that we have in about how well informed our residents are. On the page prior to that is also quite interesting about where our residents find out information about the council, and the majority of the respondents in that area say it's information provided by ourselves. So unless we're providing information, then our residents are telling us that they aren't particularly well informed about what's going on in the council. And that's important because we're here to serve the residents of our council. Alongside the strategy itself, the resident survey, there was an open-ended question that said, well, what kind of issues are you facing with the council? And we had 271 written responses, which Simon refers to within his 172-page report on the resident survey, so I'm not expecting you to have read every single one of them. But there was a point within there about the lack of free newspapers now across the patch, and information about the council not going out. There were comments about the council's website, and this does overlap to the digital strategy that we're talking about later. And to be fair, look, we know, we're not oblivious to this as officers, that there's a lot of really good information and content on the website, but sometimes it's really hard and challenging to find that information. And I don't want to talk about the search engine on our website, but I always use Google to find out what I need to do on the council website. We therefore have come up with a number of recommendations about where we are at the moment. The report talks about the context, about what we do as a local authority. It then identifies what we would like to do to help improve comms with different channels and in different groups. So we talk about social media, we talk about press and council publications. What we are seeking to do is we're seeking for funding, and that's going to be considered by the Cabinet on Monday as well, to enable us to reintroduce the View magazine. And initially, well, we're in dialogue about how we get the circulation of that publication, because we're quite aware, longer term, some people might want to receive that electronically, and again, pay testament to the fortnightly View that Helena is producing at the moment, which I think we've got a couple of thousand, nearly on the circuit. 2,500 residents which are receiving that electronically every fortnight. It would be great to increase the circulation of that, and it would be great to try and circulate the View magazine when we produce that proper electronically. But some people, my mum's 85, she's never gone to a computer in her life. We know we've got residents within the district who won't ever get online, and to be fair, some of those comments were coming out as well, that people don't have access to the internet, they have no online presence, they have no social media, and we've still got an obligation to communicate to all of our residents. Look, there's a lot in this document, and there's, as I say, a lot of really good work from Helena and Bev. I'm hoping the Cabinet will approve this document on Monday, and we can get on with implementing it and establishing that first year action plan. But Chair, if there's any comments, any questions from anybody within the committee, would really welcome that. Thank you.
Councillor Fradley, then Councillor Jenny Fradley, sorry. There's too many Fradleys at the moment.
Just a comment, actually, because I do think one of the incredibly successful communications you do is through the Waste app, because that actually pops up on your phone if you're into that kind of communication. But I do find that incredibly effective, and I think people really appreciate it. Those people who don't have that facility that I speak to in my wards really appreciate the paper copy, which, you know, you go into their houses and they've got it on the kitchen door so they can actually refer to it. So I think both are effective, but I think particularly the app is extremely effective.
If I can respond to that, we're really, really pleased with how many of our residents have taken up the app. It's going to be too cost prohibitive for us to repeat where we used to produce the printed copy. What we are hoping is that the people with the app become influencers. So they're the ones, and crikey, I do it myself. I look down the street, okay, it's a black bin today or it's a green bin, so you follow those. To be fair, we haven't had so many issues on that since we did withdraw that service.
So does that make you a bin influencer? So, and the moral of the story at the moment is most people are happy with the app then. So that's a key. Yeah, you can use that as a soundbite, couldn't you? So yeah, I don't need much for my consultancy. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with your point there, Councillor Fradley. Councillor Arthur and Councillor Keithley, please.
I was literally going to say exactly what Jenny said. My next door neighbour, we print out for her. We get it the bin collections online because she doesn't have a smartphone and she likes to see it. She puts it on her fridge with a magnet and looks at it every week, which bin goes out when. And I know lots of people found that very useful. And I'm sure it's very difficult to replicate now because it's quite complicated. But there is still the ability to go online and print it out.
Yeah, Chair, just to come back on that particular comment, Kate's absolutely right. We have 41 different round profiles now across the district because of the 1, 2, 3 plus service that we've implemented.
Yeah, Councillor Keithley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I'd like to say I was very pleased to see this. It's a great piece of work, and I think it focuses our attention on what we need to be doing going forward. I used to be a bin follower, but I've become more of a bin influencer now because I know what to put out. Just a couple of observations. I think you made a really good point, David, about the value of the view. Because we know that communicating with people, you have to use lots of channels. It's not just about the view, actually, it's about a whole load of things and about what we do, how we get to people, how we produce content that people find interesting. And I remember receiving the view in the past, and I did used to look at it myself, and I thought it was so reintroducing the view is really a great idea. I do have some concerns about how we get it to people cost effectively, because I could imagine that not only is it quite expensive to produce a glossy thing, it's even more expensive to get it to households. And I think we possibly underestimate the potential value in doing more with the parish councils, because I think the parish councils produce their own often newsletters, or they've got little groups of editorial stuff that they produce. And that's a way of getting messages into the local communities, and potentially they are a channel that we could use more beneficially if they recognise the value that they could add to this process of communicating to the communities.
Can I just respond on that particular point? So on page 167, it's like work with the town and parish councils to make use of their communications. So absolutely, and to be fair, Councillor Rice was raising that question at that point whilst we were in dialogue. Yeah, the previous View magazine, we really got away with, and to be fair, it cost hardly anything for us to produce. What we do feel is that magazine, though, did cover far too much advertising. It was more than half the document was advertising. We're looking at models, and Helena and Bev have been looking at others, particularly the Witchaven magazine is coming out, has been really informative, really well written and produced. The figures that we have put within the report, which we're asking the Cabinet to consider on Monday, would be for a Witchaven style publication. That's what we're looking for, and it would hopefully cover the cost of the printing, production and the distributions. But you're right, the distribution is an issue. You'll be aware that we produce a Parish and Partners newsletter. That newsletter, I think, is well received from the town and parish councils. We're now posting them online as well, and the View emails also make reference to that Parish and Partners, because we put a lot of time and effort into producing them. They are designed primarily for members of parish councils, clerks, the chairman, those kind of audiences. But there's a lot of information in there, especially when we do the year-end edition. That's a really well-received edition that shows what we've done as a local authority over the year. But the point about working with the town and parish councils is already recognised.
Councillor Wally-Hoggins, please.
So how are the paper copies of the View going to be distributed, please?
We're still having to we'll have to investigate that once we know we've got the budget for it. But obviously, previously we used a a combination of a company, National Leaflet Company, and Royal Mail Walksort and Teams, because obviously we're not complete postcode areas in our district. We've got lots of little postcodes and not sort of complete postcode areas, which makes it quite difficult. So I haven't looked at that for like 3 or 4 years properly, so we'd have to look at that again and to see the most cost-effective way.
Primarily, it would involve Royal Mail delivery to properties that can't be reached in other ways. And sometimes we were using supplements in free papers, but as we already said, that they're few and far between now.
I asked the question because the financial implications of using any of the distribution methods, we all know that as political groups, the financial implications of doing that are huge. So I can't see that the money that's been set aside for this at the moment would include that, and that's why I'm cautious. Thank you.
We were also looking at options. Maybe the refuse and recycling teams can deliver them, because as part of their contracts they are able to deliver leaflets and bits out. So that's one option we could look at, and they go to every household. So yeah.
Can I just mention as well that the cost that is on our strategy, it reflects the one from Avon, which is a pretty similar size, and it also includes the distribution cost for them for twice a year magazine production and delivery. They do all the content in-house as well, so obviously that makes it a bit more cost effective, which will be reproduced at Stratford District.
Councillor Keithley, did you indicate again?
Well, only quickly, Chair. I think that the team are probably looking at all sorts of avenues for distribution, and they realise...
And roads and streets as well. Come on, you'd have gave me that one, didn't you? We've gone down the cul-de-sac now, haven't we? So, come on, carry on.
Things, yeah. I just wanted to reinforce the efforts that they were making in looking at all avenues and cul-de-sacs.
You're going to be thinking
like
about that
schools
now, aren't you?
and parish councils, children, getting through children to take stuff home from school and stuff. There are lots of ways to do it. More ways to skin a cat than one.
And talk about skinning a cat. We happen to be Councillor Skinner. Sorry, Dominic. You've got to tell him off for using that. So,
thank you, Chair, I think. I want to say a few things. Firstly, it's a great document, so thank you very much for putting together. I thought it was really informative and interesting. So thank you to all officers who are involved in that. I was interested in your kind of how you're going to measure success and kind of the execution plans that you kind of put together, what success looks like. I have seen a marked improvement, I think, in the social media output of the District Council over the last kind of 6 months or so. So well done for that. I'm seeing it across all channels. More stuff, particularly on LinkedIn, I thought it was interesting, and I'm seeing that the social media output is tailored to the particular platform as well, so it's a bit more fun on something like Facebook, for example. We're a bit more business focused on LinkedIn, so that's really good to see. So it's been noticed. I had a question about AI. There's no mention of it in the document, I don't think. If I have missed it, I apologise. I do a lot of work with marketing businesses on various bits and pieces, and obviously AI is becoming more prominent, particularly from an analytical point of view. As a group, are you looking at any kind of AI-based programs or whatever it might be, even if it's ChatGPT, to help you produce content? Just to, you've got a whole mixture of people who are accessing council services in different ways and looking for information in different formats. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, how do you multiply your own output and reach those people more efficiently? And I see AI is a big plus in that.
Yeah, so we use software called Hootsuite for all of our social media scheduling and content creation, and they've recently introduced an AI generator for content creation. I do use it semi-regularly. I think it's quite hard to sort of like try to tailor it because most of the AI software on there is for businesses, and I don't think that's particularly useful for public sector, especially for district council residents. And obviously I also try to always tailor it specifically to the platform. So as you said, yeah, LinkedIn, we try to make it more business. in Instagram, I use more like stories, so a bit shorter text. And Facebook and Twitter. Facebook, I try to make content longer, and Twitter, obviously, you have to have a certain amount of words on Twitter. So I don't particularly find that super useful, but it is being explored through the Hootsuite software. And I am planning on adding that to the annual action plan that we're going to produce alongside the strategy. So it will be in sort of like the social media scheduling side for that.
Any other questions before I
Chairman,
come in?
can I just
Oh,
respond
yes,
to that
sorry, Mr.
point
Clark.
as well? I didn't understand what Helena was saying, but I'm sure it's great. I'm sorry, I don't really fully understand AI. But enough to know that we have also launched our AI bot on the website, which is a tool that people can use. And actually, it's really much better than the current search engine that's on that bot. Within the document itself, we talk about the website, and we do need to refresh our website. That's an absolute given. What the bot, the AI, has already helped us identify are the questions that people are asking that we can't answer currently with information on our website. So we're going to use that information to help populate the website with information that's useful. And the paper also talks about a web edited position for a 2-year period to help us get consistency of content across the website as well. So whilst we talk about engaging with all channels, social media, website, if people can self-serve, then that does help organisational costs within the organisation. So that's something we're definitely looking at.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. It's quite interesting. We're talking about how language has changed. Obviously, AI, artificial intelligence. Years ago, coming from a rural area, AI was artificial insemination, and it's just strange how. So we've got to make sure our terminology reflects the change in society. But I bet you thought you'd come to a scrutiny committee and we'd be talking about artificial insemination. But that's a serious point, really, is the fact communication has changed and we have to do things in different ways. I think I've got several points. I fully endorse the additional allocation of the £80,000. Sorry, Mr. Wall.
Could I just come back on what was just said about the AI communication?
Yeah.
We do have, as David said, we sort of monitor the questions that are posed through that AI chat forum, and I do have a transcript of somebody that talked to the council in a language I still can't decipher what that language is, but we then had a translation of it, and they had a full conversation asking about the cost of a green bin and how they can go about getting one.
Yeah.
So they got the full answer that they asked for in a language. I still can't work out what that language is, but yeah, so that person self-served in a completely foreign language.
Yeah. That's really good. Yeah. Yeah, it's really helpful. Yeah, so talking about the allocation, I don't think it's no coincidence that, as Councillor Skinner said, and others said, that there has been an increase, a boost in the way we're reaching people and the quality of our communication, which has been linked to additional resources. So, yeah, I think the additional resources, and I assume that in 1.3 says what can be achieved with limited support, and I assume that's limited as in terms of time limited, as opposed in terms of whatever. So I think the point from Overview and Scrutiny is that, yes, we support the additional of £80,000, potentially coming back to see how in the future what benefits the additional resources have had, and are we meeting our demographics, are we meeting all our people, and people like Councillor Rolfe mentioned who don't use IT as much. So again, are we still reaching that demographic as well? So I think that's quite important. I do think it is. It was a bit of a drop off, and it's not coincidental that it coincided with the viewers. So I think we do need to have it in some shape or form, and whether it can be tailored to meet the needs and be done cost effectively, etc. Yeah, using the recycling team, I think it's a good idea, not a rubbish one. So I think that's a good one. See, there's another one you can use as well. But on a serious point of view, 1.6, 10,000 households with a survey. responded almost 1,700, so somewhere between 16 and 70%, which is okay, and it says the survey allowed the council to answer specific questions and etc. So whilst 16 and 70% I think is quite the norm, and it's quite a good one, I think Simon said, is there any way that we can ensure we can get into 20%? Where's the way we can get an even better response? Can we do some form of incentivisation? Because obviously the more information you get back, because just looking at the figures, well, 16, 70% responded, but 83, 84% didn't respond. So why didn't they respond? Are we missing some key points from that? Are there a certain demographic, etc.? So it's just a thing that's from scrutiny I'd like to see. So whether we could come back in the future, look at how the additional money is spent, what ways we can do these effectively. And the only thing, and you're right, it just link in with the digital strategy, because I still get criticism that the website is clunky. You're right about the steam engine, you're right about the search engine, because somebody says the search engine is more like a steam engine. That wasn't me, by the way, but I do agree that it can be better. So I think these two are interlinked, and if we want to do more people to self-serve, we've got to again make it as easy as possible. Or if it's like a councillor like me, you have to try and make it as idiot-proof as possible. So that way, if you can test it on the councillor and they can do it, that way members of the public should have no problem with it whatsoever. Members of the councillors like me and Councillor Keith, we'll do it with serious, don't we? We can sense check it. So we're more than happy to help. But I think that, this is a great report. I think we do need additional resources. I do think we need a strategy that links in with the website, and I would like to see, one, the satisfaction rate, how well residents feel informed, and go back to the 50s, high 50s, low 60s that we've had previously. I'd like to see us trying to get an even better response rate of 16 to 70% into the 20% plus, and make sure that we use our best resources possible, including the recycling team if necessary. So hopefully that's taken as constructive criticism, because this, as Councillor said, we have noticed a marked increase in productivity, performance, and quality that's come out, and some of our residents are saying that they do feel more informed now. But I think this is something we can build on, and with this additional finance, that will be helpful. So, members of the committees, is that a reasonable summation of any officers want to come in and add anything? Are we all happy on that?
Mr. Just come back on a couple of points you raised there, Chair. Simon made a conscious decision this time to go to more people than we had previously done. We previously did 1 in 10 households, which was about 6,500 properties. What we would do was send the survey out, and then we would send reminders out. Those reminders weren't always met with positive responses. Therefore, Simon changed his strategy this time to go to a wider group in the first instance. To get back 1,700 responses, he's very, very happy with, to be fair, because that is a really good indication about the feelings within the council area. We did have a disproportionate amount of over 65s respond, so we have 25% of our population are aged over 65. 50% of the responses were from the over 65 age group. What Simon has done, though, he's then weighted all of those responses to make sure that they're representative across the piece. I'm sure he would love to talk to you about his resident survey. He talks very passionately. He's just spent a lot of time and effort putting that 172-page report together, and it will form the basis of the State of the District debate that we have in here on the 14th of October. Just coming back on some of the comments about that website, also within that resident survey, there was a question about how satisfied or dissatisfied you were with the council's website. 51% of respondents said they were fairly or very satisfied, and only 11% said they were fairly or very dissatisfied. So there's far more people that were happy with it. I think we acknowledge there's a lot of good content on there, but it's finding the content, and that I think you made the point about the steam engine. I haven't heard that analogy before, but we've just got to get better at selling what we're doing and making sure there's more relevant information, and that information is kept up to date regularly as well. So I really welcome the debate. I think it was a really positive debate, and we're looking forward to rolling this out. There will be an annual action plan. We'll monitor, we'll feedback whenever you'd like us back to come back to say what kind of positive results there are. The request for the funding for the view is for a 2-year period initially, and then we will rerun the resident survey, and it'll be very interesting to see whether that reduction has reversed, and we're back at the high 50s, early 60s on that satisfaction. But thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. I think we can bring that one to a close. I think pretty positive on this. There are some improvements that can do, and like I say, I do think that the website, we've got the information there, but it's not necessarily easy to go. It's not quite the Andre Previn, we've got the right notes, but not necessarily playing them in the right order. I'm sort of, I know. I was hoping you'd explain that, David, as a similar. Even Beverly's too young to explain that one, aren't you, Beverly? So yeah, thank you very much for your attendance. That's been really. Yeah. We've been going near an hour and a half. I just wondered whether you want a quick break. It's gone slightly colder as well. If somebody can.
I'll try and turn the heating up for you.
Marcy, are you warm? You look cold, I'm afraid. So.
I'm not cold, I'm warm.
Oh, but if we have 5 minutes break, and then we'll come back, and the next item we'll be talking about is the digital strategy. Can we start again, please? Yep. We had slightly longer than 5 minutes, but I think we had several things to do. So thank you for that. Next item on the agenda is we will now be talking about the digital strategy. This comes under Councillor Curtis, and Mr. Burrell is here, and Steve. Hi, Steve. Thank you. To give us a quick overview, very briefly, and if there's any questions for the officers, far away then, please, Mr. Burrell.
Thank you, Chair. Just as Mr. Buckland paid tribute to the staff that helped him develop the corporate communication strategy, I'm the sponsor for the digital strategy, and Steve Butterworth, to my right, has pulled the majority of the work together. So thank you very much. It's a very comprehensive document. If I could ask Steve just to do that overview that you're talking about, then we could perhaps go into any detailed questions that may arise from it.
Brilliant, thank you. Far away, Steve. Good to see you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Well, thank you. I think it's arguable that there's a growing expectation now for a 24/7, always-on service, and I think we recognise the importance of meeting that demand. As such, we've tried to put forward a digital strategy that has that vision with 4 key objectives, and that's then distilled down into some high-level actions. One thing I would like to try and emphasise in the document, we've tried to build sufficient flexibility within it, and appreciate that this will need to be a dynamic document as the digital landscape moves so quickly that we need to make sure that we're not rigid in our approach. And I think it's already been mentioned here, the term of artificial intelligence and how that's, the terminology has changed, and also on how quickly that has moved into the forefront of our everyday lives. So that is one particular part that we've tried to incorporate within this document, of having regular reviews and that we are always open to change. Thank you.
Any questions? I've got a couple. Shall I kick off, and then if members want to come in? One is, I'm going to say 1.4.2, user-focused design. You've said the magic word, simplifying. And again, I think as councillors, if you do need anything road tested, if we can cope with it, I would assume that significant members of, majority of our population will be able to cope with it as well. So more than happy to help. I do think that, yes, simplifying, streamlining, and making it as user-friendly as possible. Obviously, you've given the acceptance, acknowledgement that whatever you do, you won't be able to meet everybody. So we do need to have something like an analogue version or an alternative version for people we can't do. So I think that's really important. It's quite good that we've got Mr. Burrell here. 5.2.1, the £1.1 million investment over the next 3 years, 1.1 fully funded with budgets of 400, 350k, 350k in the next 3 years. You say the investment will be funded by a combination of existing budgets, external funding sources, so it'll be interesting to know which ones they are, and efficiency savings. It'd be good to see what type of efficiency savings they would be, in which areas in particular, and would you be able to quantify what those savings are likely to be, please?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we had a sum of money for sort of digital transformation already within an earmark reserve. So at the end of the last financial year, I added another 750,000 to that earmark reserve. So that's where the 1.1 million comes from. The phasing of that budget is not an exact science, but it's sort of there to emphasise it'll be slightly front-loaded, but sort of relatively even over the next 3 years. External funding will depend on the solutions that we look for and what funding is available. Certainly when we implemented our current financial system, Mr. Buckland managed to secure some external funding for that. So that didn't cost anything, I believe. So depending on the solution, depending on what's available. And what was the other question at the end? The efficiency savings, there are no efficiency savings as such that are built into the medium-term financial strategy coming out from the implementation of this digital strategy, but what we're aware of, it will deliver efficiencies. So if I could use the contact centre as an example, where technology can answer bin queries, it allows the same number of staff to be employed, but answer other queries more comprehensively. So it gives a better level of service to the people that need to phone up, basically, rather than someone phoning up saying, when's my bin going to be emptied, etc.
So you'll be able to do more with the same level of services, same level of resources, rather than doing the same level of service with less resources?
I would like to say better level of service with the same resources.
You say, doing more with, No, that's brilliant. That's really clear. Councillor Littlewood, please.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to 1.4, right at the beginning, or 1.4.1, should I say, it lists the areas of key priority, with enhancing the online experience, improving internal processes through automation, expanding digital inclusion, etc., etc. And the final point is investing in cybersecurity. Sorry. My question, and it's almost a thought that's saying, should that really be in the same list? Should that be in the same budget? Because to me, cybersecurity and investing in cybersecurity for this organisation is critical, and mission critical, because it will cost us an awful lot more than the budgets you're talking about if that went wrong and we were attacked successfully. So should that not be, and it's only a question I'm asking, and I'm happy to be told that it's not a question for here, but should that not be a ring-fenced and separate budget to the other enhancements that are being proposed?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, we do have a budget, obviously, for cybersecurity and measures that we employ to protect ourselves against attack. It's included here to ensure that the digital strategy takes it into account when developing a solution. We wouldn't want to expose ourselves whilst trying to deliver a digital solution to help the communities interact with us. So it's basically a nod to the fact that we recognise there's a need to be aware of the cyber security implications, and there may be additional costs associated with a solution to ensure that that digital solution is cyber secure. It doesn't attempt to replace the cyber security that we currently have in place or fund it.
Okay, thank you. My concern is, of course, that we talked earlier about things rapidly changing. Nothing changes more rapidly than cyber attack, and we need a buffer budget in there. We need a reserve to be able to cope immediately with things like that. So I was reading it incorrectly, as you pointed out, and I'm glad to see that it is ring-fenced and should be considered separately, perhaps.
I've got Councillor Jenny Fraser, then Councillor Wally Hawkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. Might not be a question for this particular discussion, but we talked about sort of savings, and if you can expand the people that can actually receive digital information. We've talked about older people and various people who actually don't have access to it. Is there any policy for trying to spread those skills into the population that we're dealing with in the district? I mean, there used to be all kinds of silver surfing and all kinds of activities which encouraged people to become more competent.
Yeah, we will certainly engage with the community to identify any needs. I can't propose to fund a full education programme for a particular sector of the community. We've recently installed a customer access terminal in Southern. We're looking to deploy another one to Ulster to help people that don't have the technology at home communicate without having to travel in. My own father's, he's in his 80s, he's got a Chromebook. My father-in-law's got a Chromebook, so they access information. I wouldn't think they're capable of communicating on it. So it's making sure that we deliver what's achievable without sort of going down a rabbit hole and spending money on something that doesn't deliver what we hope to achieve, if that makes sense.
Fragie, can you bring your thing closer?
I think it really is being aware of what's out there that actually enables people to become more competent, and actually making sure that those are perhaps supported.
We certainly will engage with people and do whatever we can.
Yeah. And I think actually putting terminals into places where people can easily access them with the help to get onto it would be useful as well. Because getting more people onto it is going to be more cost effective.
Absolutely, yeah.
Councillor Wally Hoggins, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this document. I think it's really thorough, and from my perspective, it gives me reassurance that as a council, we continue to be a nimble council, ready for technologies that have not yet been invented. I know that, you know, I was told 20 years ago that we're actually educating people for technologies that don't yet exist, and here we are embracing it with all endeavours here. One of the things, however, that I think we've highlighted is the need, is the older population of Stratford, and I'm with you, Richard, that we can't go around providing education programmes. But I think that one of the things that we could do as a council is a little bit like the water boards and electricity, that you can become what they call a priority customer, so that they know that you're older or that you have needs, that it might be something that people could register for, that they would receive paper copies of information as required, or that if they rang, people would automatically know that they needed just that little bit more time on the telephone, you know, hard of hearing, that kind of thing. I think that's something that we could, as people take more use and advantage of the technologies, that should really free us up to have that personal stuff for those in the greatest of need. Like many people in this room, I've got elderly parents, and there is absolutely no way on this God's earth that they would deal with any of this other than looking at the weather and the news on their tablets. So I do think that we could be more creative. It isn't a question of going in and being able to use those portals. It is a question of what can we do as a council to be kinder and more helpful to our to that particular age group of population. And I welcome this document, because I think it gives us, it will enable, as you've already said, more opportunity for them to have a longer, better time with an advisor. And thank you. Great document. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, you want to come back, Mr. Perks?
Yeah, I was just catching up with Helena. In response to Councillor Fradley's question, apparently there are quite a lot of community groups that we're supporting sort of through the Men in Sheds initiative, and there's some groups in Shipston. So Helena's sort of actively involved in trying to get this sort of information out to them. So whilst we perhaps can't provide it directly, we are using the opportunities to work with other groups to do that. So just thought that was useful to me.
Do you want to come back in, Councillor Budget?
That's very helpful and very encouraging. Thank you.
Brilliant. Like I say, the only other thing I'd got is, again, we spoke about feedback in communications, and I see on page 138, establish proactive feedback, consult collection, agile systems for rapid response. Again, if we do get some details of the feedback and how that feedback's been actioned, or, you know, obviously some of the feedback might be interesting to say the least, and it might not necessarily need a response, but if there are some feedback that we can review and see if they can make a positive difference, again, that'd be interesting to see what we get from that. So, Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you, Chair. Another great document, guys. Thank you very much. Really interesting to read. Innovation. That's digital and innovation go hand in hand. You said yourself, things move very, very quickly from a technological point of view. We want to be at the tip of that spear, very much so. I kind of went into RAF a little bit then, because I do a lot of work with RAF Digital. And we have a programme called Astra, which promotes innovation within various different departments. Anyone can bring those ideas forward. That very much links into digital, and what we do is what we call a whole force concept, which isn't that dissimilar to how the council looks. So I was just interested, reading the innovation section, section 2, does the council, or do you as a group, SDC Digital, do you have any kind of internal initiatives where if someone identifies a problem, I see digital very much as most likely a solution to that. Do you have any internal processes or projects that encourage that level of collaboration and agility within departments?
Yes, yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, we have a transformation team, and that is one of the outcomes that will come from this digital strategy. We recognise that digital solutions will increase efficiency, and even within the council there are systems that stand alone, and by having those systems integrated, that will reduce duplication and the errors that would otherwise happen. So entering onto one database and entering the same information onto another database, well, that's a waste of time, and the opportunity for an error is there. And certainly, with going back to your point about innovation, we have an in-house development team that's developed a data flow process. If I could use the example of the request for a garden bin again, from the point where that gets asked, it's all automated right the way through, from the request to the payment to that bin turning up. So there's virtually there is no sort of human intervention in there, and it's a sealed, seamless flow that interacts with our database in the refuse section, with BIFA telling them to collect from our house, with the ticketing firm Permaserve that produces the ticket that goes onto the bin that automatically gets sent out. Then it gets referred to the payment solution that takes the payment off their credit card. So that's all been developed in-house. So that in itself reduces errors. So it's not as though somebody phones up and they get halfway through taking the details and processing it and forgets to ask for the ticket or forgets to tell BIFA to deliver a bin. So it's innovation, and any process within the council will be looked at as part of this digital strategy to see if we can improve on the efficiency. Because ultimately it will release resources. So whilst we may not be able to say we'll save £10,000 as a consequence of it, it probably will mean we won't have to employ another 10,000 to cope with additional demand.
Yep.
Just a quick follow-up, Richard. Thank you for that. So just so I can understand clearly, there's a mechanism in place. I work in a department in this council, for example. I'm seeing every day I've got I see a better way of doing what I'm doing. It might be moving information from one database to another. I have an idea, so therefore there's a mechanism that I can feed that up the chain to people who can then look at a digital solution for that process. In the REF, in the Astra programme, we've got to the point where we've got that much innovation. We've had to rein it back and put frameworks in place because people are doing all sorts of crazy things. So I just want to I'll just be interested to know if that is the case, that there's an opportunity for it's pushing authority to information, so it's empowering from everybody, from the people that work on the front gate here right through to the top of this council, that if they see a way of improving what we do, digital I see very much as the catalyst for that there's a mechanism that they can feed that back. And I don't want to give you guys more work necessarily, because I know you're pretty busy, but it's just, any of these little things that can drive efficiencies, I think, are really important. It's empowering our own people as well to think outside the box a little bit.
We do encourage feedback to the development team, and we were complimented just the other day. We was in a meeting with the revenues team, and there's a gentleman there that said that some of the work that had been done by the development team had freed up probably 2 days worth of time within their section, purely from sifting information. So it's without going into detail, it was hundreds of lines of information that would have, sort of either that way, this way, or that way, and a routine was written in-house that does that daily now, so it completely alleviates that piece of work in a working week. So we do have that process where people do approach the development team saying, can you do this? And we have a work programme. But following this digital strategy going to Cabinet, there will be a digital strategy implementation plan that will seek the bigger gains that we hope to achieve by linking the larger databases internally.
Councillor Skinner, can you just put your... Sorry, thank you.
I think it's just wanted to. I'll add one last thing. I think it's refreshing to see an organisation like this having that capability in house and fostering it and putting money into it and putting resource into it. Too many times you've seen local authorities and governments outsource this kind of thing into the private sector. I think it's fantastic to see that we're retaining that in house and creating a forward-thinking and more robust council because of it. So, well done, guys.
Yeah, also, I think just add on to that, provides a bit of resilience, doesn't it? We're not reliant on external organisations to come in who've got lots of other priorities and would potentially say, oh, well, you can do this, but it'll cost. So there's always a cost to that. Just adding on to Councillor Skinner's point about staff being a valuable resource and they've got the knowledge, they're there at the coalface interacting with people. I'm sure they've got quite a few ideas and they will probably come forward, but would we be doing something like an incentive scheme to come up with some ideas, suggestions?
We could be here for the rest of the day to talk about that particular issue, but we have a mechanism in-house already where we encourage staff suggestions and comments. They come forward, they're considered by management team and we act upon them. So, yeah, we have explored that proposal and been round the Wrekin a few times on that issue. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you. It's just a great minds on that. Any other questions on that? And again, I think we endorse the recommendations. And again, I think linked to the previous one on communications, we've got to make sure we've got the right resources to do this properly. And also, we'd like to see some feedback on how the budget's used, potentially what efficiencies there are, how we're doing more with the same, more and better. Doesn't necessarily more does equate to improvement. More and better with the same level of resources, and what it's freeing those up to do, or what we can do differently as well. So I think lots to do. This is really positive strategy, and again, if you could keep us informed on that one, whether you did that by paper or did it digitally, I'm quite open to on that one. Sorry, Stuart. Right then, thank you, gentlemen. That's been really helpful. Any other questions on that one? Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, free to go. If you want to stay, Steve, and listen to the wonderful puns on the chair, you can do, but I recommend you probably make a great escape while you can. Now we've got the Corporate Peer Challenge Action Plan Review, and we've got Mr. Buckland and Mr. Perks, the dream team on this one. So,
yeah. Shall I kick off, Tony, and you can tell me when I'm wrong. We're like the two Ronnies, I suppose, couldn't we? So, little and large.
I'm glad you said that, David, because I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare.
So look, just quickly, because I know you've been here for a couple of hours already. We had the peer review. We had a review team come in March. We had the report in early June. We responded through the Cabinet with an action plan. The review was a very, very positive review. And I think organisationally, officers and members should be really pleased with the result of that review. And it did talk about very positive member-on-member relationships and member with officers, and it did also identify that scrutiny is effective within the authority. So there was a lot of positives across the whole piece for us as an organisation to take from that report. They did, though, the review team did identify 10 recommendations. I will say a lot of these recommendations were issues that we were already addressing as a local authority, but it didn't hurt to reiterate the importance of those particular points. In total, there were 10. The action plan monitoring report that you've got in front of you today shows that we've actually achieved or almost achieved 7 out of the 10, with 3 further actions to be completed. We have the pleasure of a visit by the review team in January next year. They will be very keen to understand how we've taken their recommendations and how we've implemented those as a local authority. So we have this report now, and we'll also have another report to the Cabinet in early January, just before the review team, so we can demonstrate how we've mainstreamed the points that they've raised. But Chair, if there's any comments, any questions, Tony, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else.
No, I think that's a very thorough summary of where we are.
Any questions on this? I've got a couple, but Councillor Keithley, do you want to kick off first? Go on, you open the button, I'll come in.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I have, in respect of the recommendation on page 73, it's about strengthening the citizens panel, which I thought was interesting. And I see that we've achieved, through the resident survey, more than 200 volunteers have signed up to be part of that, which is seems like quite a good number to me. I'd just be interested to know how the citizens panel will actually work, and whether or not you could just give us a quick overview of how you see that working over the next 12 months, if that's possible.
I can give you an answer. It won't be as extensive as Mr. Purfield could give you that answer, but it is a group of around 400 citizens that we have used for some time, where we undertake survey work predominantly, and they are individuals who have said, I mean, we were talking earlier about the response rate of being 16-17% on that was a cold survey that went to all households. The people that have signed up to the citizens panel have indicated that they would be happy to complete surveys to help us test opinion on issues as we go through the year. So it was about 400. Some of them have been on there for some time. So we were encouraged, out of the 1,700 people that responded to this, the wider resident survey, we've got about another 50% of newer members now, new residents who are happy to take part in that panel, and it will freshen the blood of that. So that was seen as very positive, about a 50% more. But it's generally surveys that they complete for us.
Councillor Wally-Huggins, then Councillor Johnson, please.
Yes, thank you. Just to go to page 71 and the recommendation about the co-design a compelling and long-term place-based narrative to define Stratford-upon-Avon, etc., etc., used to galvanise partners and improve the district's economic and cultural strength. The South Warwickshire local plan here is talked about here. That's been a well-established group prior to the current administration. And I'm concerned that there isn't that much evidence that progress has been made on the other factors. So the stakeholders for the working groups have been identified, which stakeholders, and the group will be called together when the outcome from the consultation is known. I'm bamboozled by the... okay, thanks then. Well done. I saw that beautifully acted out there.
I'm
so
happy to answer
I'd
that
like
one.
a little bit more meat on the bones. It's a little bit woolly, and I want a little bit more reassurance, I think. Thank you.
Okay, I hopefully can provide you with that. I think we need to sort of strike a balance here between what you quite correctly say, that this is a much broader thing than the South Warwickshire local plan, but I think it needs to sit within the context of the South Warwickshire local plan, and I think with the time available, we have the ability to do that. We're going out for preferred options on the South Warwickshire local plan at the close of this year, and I think that sets the tone of how we see as a district the sort of the development sort of going forward. It sets out the needs, it sets out what our housing requirement is in our opinion, and what our employment land requirement is in our opinion, and I think it would be a much more meaningful discussion to have in that context once we've reached that point of the local plan, to go out, well, that's still a formative stage, but whilst we've said something, rather than just go out sort of speculatively, I think we have a more refined discussion. So the work I've done today is I've sort of tried to put together a list of sort of stakeholders who might not have been necessarily involved in the South Warwickshire local plan, sort of more businesses and other organisations to date, and I'd like to do a seminar earlier in the new year with them saying, well, this is our view of the South Warwickshire local plan. Tell us what else we need to do around that to sort of shape the place going forward. But I'd like to sort of join the two initiatives together rather than have them running in sort of conflicting directions. I think that would give us a more useful piece of work. And the timescale that the peer review gave us, I think, will allow us to do that. I think it'd be more meaningful that way.
I've got some other questions. I'll bring you in next, Councillor Johnson. I've just got one little point on this point. Sometimes it's a bit about jargon. I know this is difficult and we have to cover different eventualities and we're dealing with corporate planning, but I find it sometimes, I think some of our residents might think, what does co-design a compelling and long-term based narrative to define Stratford and the district mean? We sort of know what it means, but do we, sort of thing? And I know we've got to follow standards, we've got to be consistent with the LGA. I just wonder sometimes whether we can simplify the jargon. This is not a criticism, it's just talking rubbish again. So yeah, it's just whether we can make it easier for if our residents do read this sort of thing.
Plain English is absolutely one of the principles that we have as a local authority. The specific word in that recommendation, or is the word in the LGA, we can feed that comment back to make sure that they are more meaningful to general public on that point. I take your point.
I'm not trying to be funny on this. You just the average person in the street, what would they say? When, if you're reading it down the pub and you'd had a glass of lemonade as well, you just think, well, what that would mean, sort of thing. But again, if that feedback back to the LJ would be useful. So, yeah. All right then, Councillor Johnson, can I bring you in, please?
My question was on the same point as how the development of the South Warwickshire local plan and this process fits together. Because I could see it getting quite complex and possibly a little ragged, and I just think we've got to manage that. I actually asked the Deputy Leader how he sees that going, so I'll see what response I get from that. Could I ask my second question then on the next point on page 71? Can we just know a bit more about the desktop exercise and how that's going to come together?
Chair, if I can respond on that particular point, we've got the recommendation, but there was also some further text within the report to give a bit more context about the kind of point. There's so many partners out there that we work with. It is, as it says, me, the management team, sitting down, identifying who we work with as a local authority and being smarter about how we manage some of those relationships so we don't spread ourselves too thin and we do concentrate on key partners each. So we have a draft that I've completed already with the management team and it will help govern our future working, to be fair. It's just making sure that we're not chasing every rainbow, if that makes sense.
Happy with that, Councillor Johnson? Yep. Any other questions? I've got a couple. Page 73 about the citizens panel, which we've talked about, and about the potentially 200. It says about a consultation is being undertaken with town and parish councils to understand the best format and content for these sessions to cover, and the communication strategy is being reviewed. So obviously we've just talked about the communication strategy, and again some review feedback of that to hear would be good as part of any communications report. It's just when how long the consultation exercise is going to be. Thank you, David.
Thank you. And to be fair, breaking news, the survey has been concluded. We've had responses from 41 local parish council areas across the piece, so that's positive. There is, and I won't summarize, we can circulate an information sheet and possibly would be the best way to get this information to you. But from those who responded, there is the feeling that it would be beneficial to have a forum, and the timing of that would be potentially twice a year is what we're looking at, with some kind of key agreed points to discuss. We've got to be careful that we're not preaching to town and parish councils because they are independent sovereign bodies. We want to work in partnership with them effectively. So yeah, there's lots of positive feedback about the kind of issues that they would be interested in, and it includes environmental issues, it includes things like parking, those kind of points. But we can do an information sheet that shares results from that.
For that, any other comments on that? Again, I think it's pretty positive news. I think some things are work in progress. Some things I think that we would like details as part of the communication ongoing, and obviously this and the digital strategy all linking together. Obviously, we're working with strategies as well, and to do with timescales. So I think that this is positive, but again, a work in progress. and we do need to keep an eye on what we're doing and benchmark ourselves with peers as well. And just one final point, and I'll bring you back in, David, is in the fact that one of the things we did, the digital strategy you mentioned to Steve, was about simplifying it, and if the questions and areas can be made as simple as possible in terms of explanation of what they're doing, again, it probably helps with engagement with members of the public who are thinking, oh, well, what does this mean, sort of thing. So again, yeah, do you want to come back in then?
Yeah, so just one final point, Sharon, I should have covered it in the introduction. On page 75, when we talk about the communication strategy, I've put within the report it would need to be considered at the Cabinet and then by Council. That's old news, to be fair. It doesn't need to go to Council. The communication strategy is within the policy framework of the Council, and therefore it will be resolved when it goes to the Cabinet on the 7th of October.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for communicating that for us. Thank you. Sorry about that. Any other questions on that? Brilliant. I think you're free to go on that one. Thank you. All right, we'll now move on to item 11, which is the joint cabinet meeting of the 21st of October between ourselves and Warwick District Council. And the main thing we're looking at is the Gypsy Travelling Show People and Boat Dwellers Accommodation Report. And we've got some guest speakers in the background. Stephen Stray from SDC and Mr. Tony Ward, who I've had the pleasure of knowing at least 35 years, when we were both about 12, weren't we, Tony?
Was it that long ago?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
So, yeah, the join us with the report. We had the report, we haven't got a paper version, but we had it sent to us electronically by Howard. And I've agreed that with Mr. Ward that he will give us a brief synopsis and then be available, the gentleman will be available for questions and comments prior to the meeting on the 21st of October, which I will be representing this committee as chair of Overview and Scrutiny and putting points forward along with the chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Warwick District, or whatever they're called, they might call it Audit and Scrutiny Committee there. So, Mr. Ward, if you want to fire away, please.
Thank you, Mr. Crump. Good morning, councillors, or good afternoon, nearly. Just to say, I'll just give you a quick run through, a reprise of the report. Effectively, as you know, we're trying to produce the next stage of the local plan, which will be the preferred options early next year. With all local plans, they have to be based on sound evidence, and this report is a key one in that evidence base, and that's why we feel we need to bring it to the joint cabinet to get it endorsed that way. What we've done, we followed the guidance in the NPPF and also explicit guidance in the planning policy for traveller sites, government guidance, to work through this. We appointed consultants. They are consultants that have previously done such a study for Stratford before, which was beneficial in as much as they knew the Stratford sites, they knew the families that they were going to engage with on those sites as well as part of this process. So that was most helpful. And they produced this report for us. It's taken a while. We had a slight pause while we awaited an update on government guidance, which was the planning policy for travellers sites guidance, which was reissued last December. And also more recently, we thought we were approaching the finishing line on this process when in Warwick District, we had an encampment over the Maybank holiday. Some gypsy families have set up home on a site in Warwick District and subsequently lodged a planning application with us. Now, in that context, when you're preparing these reports, you do have to take into consideration any sites in your administrative area, whether they've got temporary permission or they are still awaiting permission. So we could have issued this report or concluded this report with Warwick District having a particularly low needs figure identified. But this site came into play, and we felt it was only right and proper that it should have an impact on this report and be taken into consideration. And that was the view of our consultants also. So there's some extra work done to refresh that, which led to a slightly higher figure. The overall figures emanating from this document relate to the requirements for accommodation needs of gypsies and travellers, travelling show people, and also boat dwellers. Now, the boat dwellers requirement came as a consequence of legislation in 2016 from the government that required us to consider people living on our inland waterways. So all in all, the report sets all this out. There are differences. There are two sets of figures that can be used in particular in relation to gypsy and travellers for deriving the overall figures required. One is called the ethnic definition, and the other one is explicitly set out in the PPTS document. Now, there are differences in the two. The ethnic definition embraces all gypsy families, all people that identify ethnically as gypsies, and it's a slightly wider parameters than set out in the PPTS. Now, we are recommended by the consultants to endorse that figure, albeit it's a slightly higher requirement, in as much as it will, going forwards, it'll prevent us being the possibility of any legal challenges and show that both authorities, Warwick and Stratford, have looked at this question very seriously, and they are being truly inclusive and forward-thinking on this particular area. So that in a nutshell are the outputs. I've gone through that quite quickly. We can go into some of the precise figures more so through our discussion if you so wish. But the overriding emphasis on bringing this to you today is to see if we can answer any of your questions or elaborate on things, because we would dearly like this to move forward to the joint committee and endorse the recommendations, which are A, the overall report itself, B, in particular, to give your officers clear steer and clear guidance that you're happy for us to move forward on the preparation of policies using the ethnic definition, which is the recommendation in this report, and also just to take note that the report also considers other matters that will be material in consideration of any future planning applications, and it also gives us advice on how we might address the requirements to deal with transit need, which are transient gypsy families either visiting our area temporarily or moving through our area and settling down for a few days before moving across to other parts of the country. So I'm afraid that was a bit of a dash through. I hope that's enough for you, for starters, but we can expand on the discussion in a few minutes if you so wish. So there we are. If I give it back to you, Chair, we can open the discussion.
Thank you, Tony. That was very, very helpful, very positive, and shows in details what we've got to do on our responsibilities. So I'm willing to open this to questions from the floor. Who would like to start on this one? Or whilst you're waiting, do you want me to ask a question and you, do you want to come into it, or do you want me to start? Yeah. Right. I noticed in the financial detail, it says around about 2.2 million getting the local planning costs. And obviously, Stratford has currently £1.3 million in place. And whilst whilst it isn't particularly, it seems like there's been lots of exercise, evidence gone through to produce this information using various different consultants, particularly the ones who knew the Stratford area well, which I think is really positive. Will there be the impact? Because currently Stratford has got 1.3 million in place to fund its share. Whereas currently Warwick has only got £500,000 allocated, and another part of 1.3 million pounds of it. So, will we have the funding in place to do all our commitments, etc.? And I don't know whether it's a question for you or a question from Mr. Perks on this one.
I'll probably answer it in the first instance, if that's okay, rather than leave it to the officers. The agreement that we have with Warwick District Council is we split the costs of preparing the joint sort of local plan, sort of 50-50. We have chosen to sort of budget for it in slightly different ways. We've got an earmarked reserve that's larger than Warwick's at the moment, but that doesn't make our liability any larger. We will still be splitting it 50-50. Warwick are topping up the funding as it goes through. As with all local plans, those of you who've been through this process before, the 2.2 is our sort of our best guess of sort of the amount of money that we'll need to complete the work. That's largely dependent on what comes out of the consultation, how many iterations of the plan, changes in government policy, requirements to review evidence sort of come through. So it's a working budget rather than a fixed one.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Stuart, do you want to come in now, or shall I ask another? You come in and then I'll ask one.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much, Tony. That was really good explanation and summary. I appreciate that. Assuming that, I mean, the provision of traveller sites is often extremely controversial, and we do come up against a lot of speculative applications for sites, which result in, we say, strong feelings in local communities. But just in terms of the overall report, and on the basis that the overall report is accepted and that this guidance that you've prepared on the policy definition for, the ethnic groups, how long do you think it would be before, and it's a difficult question for you to answer, but assuming that these are accepted, how long would it be before a policy was in place that gave us some sort of concrete basis on which to judge these very sensitive issues when they come forward as applications for sites? What sort of time is it going to take?
Well, fundamentally, we won't have. What we want to do is to move from this position here and try to move towards an allocative strategy in the local plan that will set a framework of sites across both authorities for future usage. But of course, that will be dependent on the adoption of the local plan and going through the due processes. In the interim, I'm afraid we'd have to, if anything occurs in the interim, like what occurred in Warwick District earlier this year, we have to assess applications on their individual merits using the criterion-based policies that we currently have in our local plans, respectively. So I'm afraid there will be a little bit of a pause before we get to that definitive position of hopefully having a framework of sites teed up and coming into use for our future needs. So there will be a little bit of a pause, I'm afraid. Yeah. So in the interim, we'd have to rely on our current policy framework and advice that's contained within this report on any of the sort of matters to do with siting arrangements, etc., which this document also develops as well.
Can I follow up on Stuart, please?
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Tony, for that. So do I understand correctly then that this piece of work isn't going to take full effect until the South Warwickshire local plan is adopted, because it will be embedded in that? So we're going to have to wait for the local plan to be completed, are we?
In as much as having a firm position with allocations,
yeah,
and the provision of sites going forward. I mean, as the local plan moves forward, it has more weight relative to its stages in the process. So it will gain more weight as it moves forward as we develop policy. But as I say, in the interim, and what's one of the recommendations here is that the information within on particular matters will help us with the assessment of any applications that come in before that time.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
I'll bring Mr. Perks in briefly, who's got to go in a minute, and then I'll bring you in, Stephen. I could see your hands up. So if I bring in Tony and then...
Yeah, but just by way of reassurance for Councillor Keithley, really, we currently have policies in our adopted core strategy relating to the gypsy and traveller population and travelling show people, and we adopted a supplementary planning document that sets out more detail about interpreting those policies in 2021. So that information is in place, and what we will probably find is that sort of this is more contemporary sort of assessment of sort of gypsy travelling show people need, so we can sort of use this to work with our existing policies as we move towards an adopted policy that will come out in the South Yorkshire local plan in due course.
Okay. Stephen, do you want to come in, please? Good to see you.
Hi. I think, in actual fact, the two Tonys between the last two answers have said all I was going to say. So.
Two tones, eh? Very good. Thank you for that. Yeah, my question sort of like builds on what Councillor Keithley was saying, is that there's been obviously a significant amount of work done on this to provide the evidence, and obviously we need to make decisions, and the cabinets, joint cabinets need to make decisions based on strong and robust evidence. I think from the scrutiny point of view, we'd like some reassurance how strong this evidence is. Obviously, in all local plans, they are subject to challenge by various different groups. So I just want, some reassurance how robust this information is, how it stands up to challenges, and obviously we all know with the extra 12 that's caused the delay, how flexible and how flexible it is if we do need to alter it in light of additional information that crops up.
Shall I take that one, Stephen? I'd say this is a very robust document, and it will be prove to be very useful going forwards, as you quite rightly say, Andrew. I think there comes a point in time where your evidence and the freshness of that evidence is very relevant. And as this is, yet to be fully endorsed by both councils, it's about as fresh as it can be. So, if we were 3 or 4 years on from this being produced, I would I and other people outside of the planning framework looking in at us would start to challenge it perhaps and think it was not robust. But given its freshness, I would think it's about as strong as you can get. Now, going forwards, I know we had a pause and we took on board the site that arrived in Warwick District fairly recently. I think there'd have to be a point in time where you draw a line in the sand. You can't keep going back and refreshing your document and refreshing your key evidence on a piecemeal basis, time and time again. There will be, a point in time where we draw that line in the sand. So I would say we'd have to give that further consideration. But the particular matter was, looking back at what's happened earlier this year, is that the previous iteration of this study showed a very, very low need figure identified for Warwick District, and that is because the overall matter that generates your future requirements are the sites that are within your district currently, how those families multiply, how they subdivide, and so on and so forth. And then you take those analyses and then you project those forwards over the 5-year tranches in your forthcoming plan period, which is what's happened. In Warwick District, there were no sites in Warwick District when this report was prepared, and consequently the need identified was very low indeed. So it seemed churlish and not really practical for us to continue on the basis of knowing that this site that's come to be, and the planning application subsequently followed, is indicative of need in Warwick District, and it's quite a considerable amount as well, being 12 pitches. So that's why we had the opportunity to refresh the document.
Thanks. Anything to add, Stephen, or has Tony summed it up again?
No, I think that's a fair comment. What I would say is that it will be natural, I think, by officers to check as we approach the publication Reg 19 stage, just to see if there's anything really significant and fundamental that may have affected things, and think, well, do we need to review it, make amendments possibly as a result of that? But otherwise, I was just going to say, as Tony has said, which is we couldn't be any more up to date than this. And certainly, once you get beyond 2 to 3 years, then you start looking and questioning whether the evidence is up to date. But we should be hopefully in a good position for that, even down to publication in approximately a year to 15 months' time, unless there's something fundamental happens.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Mr. Perks, please.
Yeah, I think it might just be helpful for the committee that this figure is effectively the same as your housing needs figure and your sort of HEDNA figure, HELA figures that you've probably seen coming through the committee going forward. We need to establish a baseline to allow the plan to move on, and we can start to look at allocating sites. But it's based on a sort of government standard method, and we've been through the process. This is the number that comes out, and it's sort of it's kept under review as things change, but it needs endorsing as a line in the sand, so as we can sort of move on to the next stage of the plan. Really, I think that's the context that we're looking today.
Yeah, I think we're just looking for confidence that it's up to date. It's it's not challengeable, and we all know that the head and the figure changed by around about 30-40% in after the change of the government. So we were again just making sure this was up to date, robust, and then all of a sudden in 6 months' time, I'm sorry, the figures we've got here, we need to double them, sort of thing. But that sounds unlikely. We've got the evidence base, and I think it's really positive that we're being reassured that the information we got is up to date, done by recognised experts who've got local knowledge of Stratford in particular. So I think we've gone above and beyond the call for evidence on this. So I think I'm content with that. Any other questions on this before we move on? I think there's 4 recommendations as part of the report. I won't read them out, but unless members have got any burning desire to change them, add to them, I'm asking for agreement that we agree with the recommendations in the report that goes to Joint Cabinet on the 21st of October. I think it's called the South Warwickshire Local Plan, Gypsy Traveller, Traveller Show People and Boat Dwellers Accommodation Assessment Study, September 24. Obviously, that just rolls off the tongue like that, doesn't it? So we're all happy with that. We endorse that. Thank the officers for their work on this, the explanations. Hopefully the questions weren't too onerous. Mr. Ward, hopefully you enjoy your afternoon off, because I know you've come in and made a special arrangement to be in on your day off. So thank you for that, and hopefully that's noted. And thank you very much. And will either of you be at the Joint Cabinet meeting on the 21st?
Yes, I will. Yes.
So you'll be over in Stratford, Tony. We'll have to consult afterwards at the local hostelry if there's any discussions on any further approval. Good to see you, and thank you very much for your time. See you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye now. Right
then. Item number 12, urgent business. I've not been notified of any. So, thank you. At 12:36.